Greetings, everyone. My name is Liz Dunlap, and as some of you may already know me from me emailing you from my email at PreLaw@PA.org. And for those of you who do not already know me, I am Phi Alpha Delta's PreLaw Operations Coordinator, working at the fraternity's executive office. My office hours, so you are aware, are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For anyone that is wondering what time zone I'm in, which, by the way, our executive office is located in Towson, Maryland. But our office is also comprised of 8 staff members that are all here to help you out and help you make the most of your PAD experience. Before I really jump into my presentation, I just have a few housekeeping items. One, this session is going to be recorded. We're going to go over a few things and then move on to discussion. If we finish early, that's fine. I'm also happy to stay and chat with anyone who has questions. Please raise your hand or put your questions in the chat, and I can either answer as we go or towards the end during our Q&A portion. Most likely, I'll probably answer any questions at the end during our Q&A portion, just so I'm not multitasking too much. And I have a lot of content that I need to cover today with you all, and I want to make sure that we get through everything. Last, when you all signed up, we asked you a few questions about who you are and what you're hoping to get out of this. Most of you today are probably current chapter officers, and it looks like there was a pretty even mix of interest in all of the topics we promised to go over. So this is just meant to be an overview, but please don't be afraid to ask your questions or follow up with me after the session. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to take that silence as a no. So let's begin and dive in. So first things first, I would like to just begin today's presentation by going over some of the major pre-law deadlines, not just for the spring, but also a few major events that also occur in the fall that you can even start preparing for now. Additionally, I wanted to share some notes about our current fee structure that you can jot down today, and I think is going to be really helpful for you to keep in mind going forward when you're recruiting your new students. So if you're already current officers and have been previously reported to me, then you should have already received emails from our office about some of the following important dates and events. The first one, April 5th, that is our deadline to hold officer elections. Yes, spring elections should happen annually, and ideally once per year, so that your newly elected officers have at least one full year to fulfill their role and reap the benefits of being a leader within the chapter. We know sometimes it's not always possible to make this exact deadline. If you're in the planning process now, try to aim for as close as possible, and once newly elected officers are selected, please ensure that those new officers are reported to my email at PreLaw@PA.org. We want chapters to have as much time as possible to transition to their officer roles. Newly elected officers don't actually have to take over until the transition is complete, which leads us to our next date. April 15th, that's your deadline to hold your officer transitions and submit your fall 2022 semester programming. This is the deadline for the chapter's officer transition process to be completed. And during that process, the incoming and outgoing officers should be sitting down, working together to create your fall 2022 calendars, and since that's all due together. And this is also a time period too for any other items that incoming and outgoing officers should be meeting and working on together, such as passing on bank account information, social media, and chapter passwords. And all of that should be done by the 15th. And I will also expand more on the new officer transition process a little bit later on in this presentation. So moving on from there, first Monday in June, that's going to be June 6, 2022 this year. That is our deadline to submit pre-law award applications. So please, it's your time to shine. The executive office, we don't ask for much here, but we really want to see your chapters and officers recognized for all of your hard work and ingenuity. As a member of the executive office, I can assure you that in working with you all, we are aware of what you're doing as far as your events and what you've been able to accomplish at your local schools and in your communities. And we just want to see you apply for awards and get that recognition. I already know that I have some chapters here represented during this session that have applied in the past year. And have also been recognized. So kudos to you all. We know pre-laws can also get competitive. So again, at the very least, if your chapter is recognized after submitting award apps, then you'll be able to definitely bring home some bragging rights. Okay, moving on from that. We already have dates in mind for this year's PreLaw Conference. For some of you that may already be aware, and for those that aren't aware what PreLaw Conference is, this is and yes, I mean the biggest national pre-law event of the year. Each year we hold PreLaw Conference, and it's an event that's basically it's filled with exciting workshops and keynotes. There's a mock trial competition and a law school expo. If you're seriously thinking about a career in the legal field, then this is the event to attend, and it's going to help you give a leg up in your journey if you are interested in pursuing law or law school. More information and details about PreLaw Conference are going to be shared closer to the event, and I also have a little bit more to share as well about PreLaw Conference and just a bit more of a breakdown of what usually happens each year there too. And that is going to be later in my presentation. I will also take any questions about that as well at the end. And a couple more items on November 8th, that is P.A.D Founders Day. And that is also the deadline for when spring 2023 semester programming calendars are going to be due. I know thinking about spring 2023 already seems like worlds away, but again, the sooner that you can plan things, the better. And just a little bit more about what Founders Day is. Phi Alpha Delta Law Fraternity was founded on November 8th, 1902. And that is a special day for P.A.D brothers and sisters, friends, partners, and our sponsors to come together and give back and make an impact for the student, the school, and the legal profession and the community. We usually have a week that is planned around Founders Day. We call it Founders Week, and that's when P.A.D members come together from all over and help to celebrate the history of our fraternity and grow closer to one another today. And last point, and I actually forgot to put this on my presentation, but we also celebrate National Hazing Prevention Week. The dates for that have not been shared yet. What happens with that is that we actually partner with an organization called National Hazing Prevention.org, and each year around September usually, they will promote week-long planned events and activities that are designed around promoting awareness and best practices to prevent hazing. We strongly encourage chapters to get involved in any way. The organization is still finalizing their dates and events for this year, but once they're published, we will be sure to share them in our communications. The last thing I'm going to say about National Hazing Prevention Week 2 is if your school has any requirements for chapters to do any anti-hazing events or anything like that, this is also a good way to fulfill that requirement by getting involved, looking and seeing what nationalhazingprevention.org is doing, and attending and promoting their events to your chapter membership. Woo! All right. Moving on, I also want to review the fee structure. So as many of you probably already know, the pre-law student members international initiation fee is $125. That is a fee that will last you through your undergraduate career and only needs to be paid once upon joining. And that fee should also be paid online or if via check, but that should be sent to the executive office. Please, officers, do not collect cash. If you are a pre-law student that is graduating and will be attending law school in the future, and you wish to join an active law chapter at the law school you're attending, we also have a senior transition fee. That fee is $70 and is also one time. Another scenario here with fees that I want to add as well. There are no fees if you are a pre-law student member, and let's say that there's a chapter at your school, but you're going to be transferring to another school where there is another active pre-law chapter. There is no fee there to transfer between active pre-law chapters. And we also have customizable payment plans available. One of the biggest questions we get asked is if we waive the fees. And this is something, if you're jotting or taking any notes, this is really important what I'm about to say. So our organization, we do not waive fees. And the reason why we don't do that is because we're a nonprofit organization, a 501c7 nonprofit. And those initiation fees are necessary for our organization to operate, for the executive office to operate and implement things. The 125 fee will cover initiation materials, chapter insurance, and it also allows us to provide free recruitment materials, event materials, free webinars and content, member benefits such as LSAT and test prep services, and more. I think it's very important to note for the recruitment purposes that a 125 fee for undergraduate membership and how member benefits tie into that cost is very good. And again, while we don't offer fee waivers, we do offer fully customizable payment plans. So that is my spiel on that. Are you all still with me? Do we have any questions or anything? All right. Moving on. Okay. So since we've covered fees, and especially with the last note that I made about fee waivers, I think that's going to transition really well into my next section about spring recruitment. So why is spring recruitment so important? Chapters should be recruiting all the time. Consistent intake of new members is healthiest as opposed to any spikes in membership. And moving on from that too, there's a question as well as, how spring and fall differ when it comes to recruitment. Spring is a very good time to focus on anyone who didn't join in fall semester, and that's a time that will help you to adjust your strategies, which we'll go over in a minute. Usually fall is naturally set up, so you're recruiting new students, and in this case, usually maybe freshmen and transfer students, and that's happening through orientation, organization fairs, and etc. You can use spring as a time to follow up with those people who showed interest but didn't join in the fall. And definitely don't forget to engage with any graduate students as well on your campus. For those that don't know, grad students are also certainly welcome to join a pre-law chapter, and we are proud to have an open membership policy. So as long as students are considered in good standing with the school and enrolled, then that student is eligible to join. All right, so my next point on battling issues with engagement with the chapter. So I know that this is a problem, and I'm not going to sit here and claim to have the most perfect solution for you. I'll admit we're all a little burned out these days, and that's completely understandable. What you should do is get members involved as soon as they've joined. And from that, with your chapter membership, build on that enthusiasm and have those students join on a committee or maybe even just attend an event. And this is another reason too why it's super important to have your semester programming planned out as far in advance as you can. As chapter officers, work on a communication strategy, and that can also include a chapter group chat, regular email blasts, and social media, which I know a lot of you are probably already doing. Evaluate your calendars as well and see which events do well and which ones don't. I'm also going to plug that your chapter can also try a point system to boost engagement from your membership. Please remember, this is to incentivize membership, not punish them. And our organization actually provides steps on how to implement this in our pre-law operations guide. I'm going to go over guides at the very, very end, because the pre-law ops guide is one of the most important things that should be, that is one of the most important guides that you should have saved and be reading as chapter officers or anyone that's interested in running for a position. But yeah, I'm also welcome to answer any follow-up questions on the point system later. And also, if anyone has anything that they've tried that's done well as far as incentivizing and boosting engagement, please also feel free to throw those in the chat. You all are welcome to, message, and this session should also be a space for sharing ideas and, getting you all talking to one another as well too, because it's not always, if something is working for one chapter, it's always great to spread that information as well and, not gatekeep or silo any of that. So yeah, and my last point on new semester, new strategy, what kind of things can you try in the spring? Like I already mentioned before, you can follow up with anyone who showed interest in Phi Alpha Delta in the fall but didn't actually join, and see if they want to do so now. Don't forget to engage also with any part-time or non-traditional students. Focus on building your connections with other organizations on campus. For example, you can be a member of P.A.D and a member of any other non-legal fraternity organization. And we encourage working with other organizations on your campus because you might be able to recruit from their memberships or even co-host and plan events together. I've seen that happen with chapters, and I've seen that work out really, really well. And my last point here is you can tailor your spring events to topics and programs to things that will help members also prep for finals and the summer too. So these are just really good things to think about as you think about recruitment, and also some stuff with events. I also have some more tips and advice on events too that I will be covering in a few minutes as well. Okay, planning for elections. I'm going to start by going over a basic process for elections. There are a lot of ways to do these steps, but these are the critical elements. So again, hope you guys are all ready. Take some notes. All right, so one of the first things you want to do is advertise. Anyone who's a member in good standing, any chapter member that is in good standing with the chapter may run for office. It's best practice that all chapter members receive that information of what positions are open and what the duties of each position are ahead of time. And you can find position descriptions in our chapter operations handbook, as well as in our pre-law model bylaws template. And again, I'm going to go over a little bit of guides, and I'll tell you where those are located at the end. But when advertising, set a due date for your nominations, and members can nominate themselves or other members. And when you're collecting these nominations, consider if you want to ask for any candidacy statements or questionnaires. I don't suggest making this mandatory, but it's good to give members the option to submit something, even if you plan to have in-person candidate speeches. So once you have the full slate of candidates, you'll want to publish the slate and all the logistical details to the chapter. This will include when elections will be held and what format, virtual versus in-person, or both, and when chapter members will have an option to hear or read candidates' platforms. Personally, I think it's a good idea to have these published in advance so everyone has a chance to hear, but you can set things up so candidates can speak in person before voting. You can also allow candidates to have other members speak for them in support. And we do this for our national P.A.D elections, which happen at convention, but that's not necessarily something you have to worry about anytime soon. All right, so one of the critical things is the voting itself. If you are in person, you can have this done by a hand raise, a paper ballot, or a verbal vote. Again, when you're casting your actual votes, again, it's hand raise, paper ballot, or verbal vote. If it is virtual, we think it's a good idea to set up a voting period, usually about 48 to 72 hours. And that should be enough time for everyone to vote electronically. So once voting is complete, you're going to want to publicize the results and start setting up the officer transition. Part of this publicizing is telling me here at the executive office, so I know who the new officers are, your chapter president at the very least, and also any faculty advisors, and if required, your school administration that is involved with student organizations, activities, or fraternities. Okay, virtual versus in person. What is easiest? What is safest? And what is the most accessible? Some of the benefits of in-person, one of those, you can have people present their candidacy statements live and allow for chance for questions, and it's usually faster. A con of in-person is that if someone can't attend, then that can limit participation. For virtual elections, one of the benefits for that is that it's a lot more streamlined as a process, but one of the cons of that to consider is that it can take longer and there's less of a chance for candidates to interact with members. So other things to consider as well that I'm just going to mention here too is platforms, because I know sometimes I get stuck on the logistics, but personally I like Google Forms. You may be able to do it through a school platform like Blackboard. And also let me know in the chat if your school is using something other than Blackboard, because truthfully, I am a millennial and I know we used Blackboard back when I was an undergrad, but I'm genuinely curious to know too if that's changed in any way. And I would also mention too, please consider a hybrid option. You can host a candidate forum where candidates can speak, answer questions, but also publish written statements and host voting electronically in a shorter time period. Okay, I did see a hand raised, but I am actually having a little bit of a technical issue. So if you can just hold your question at the end, and then I will answer it for you. I'm so sorry for my tech setup right now. All right. Oh. Actually missed a point here. Okay, so a common election issue that I just want to mention as well, some common issues, participation from chapter members. Sometimes there may not be enough people to actually vote. And if you can't get everyone together in a room, maybe a virtual vote is the best way to go. We consider a quorum about 20% of your chapter's membership that is in good standing. If you can't get this, just contact me. We do have some procedures for how to assist. Don't expect 100% participation though. And then sometimes there's contentious elections. We all know elections can get a little nasty if you feel that this is going to be an issue, definitely invite a faculty advisor or PAD volunteer to help oversee things. So yeah, and then sometimes there's a lack of candidates. Just try and fill the positions that you can and add more officers later. Focus on key positions like the president, vice president, and the treasurer. Those are pretty crucial as far as operations. For example, the president and treasurer are actually the only officers that have authority and access to your chapter bank account per our fraternity policies. Okay, and if you're virtual, a common election issue is that tech issues can happen. These things happen because, for example, I'm having a little bit of a tech issue right now with my mouse that is preventing me to properly check the chat, but that is okay. We just roll with it. Okay. And now onto the officer transition checklist. I promise we're almost done. So now that you have your new officers, let's get them settled into their new roles and let's discuss what that looks like. So your transition can be a process that is drawn out over a few meetings, or it can just be a single one. It can be everyone all together or a one-on-one with each officer training their replacement. Like I said before, this doesn't have to be right away. If you can, try to have a shadowing system for about a month or so afterwards. I've also found that that works with some chapters in the past, but this is all up to you. Just make sure that you do it and train the new officers that are coming in. And make sure too, you review the new officer transition checklist. This checklist is in our new officer guide. And that is something that will be emailed to new officers once you report them to me. So once I get them to my email, I'll send you a response, a nice little welcome to new officers, and that will mention everything that they need to know as far as important deadlines and operations. And they will also get a copy of that new officer resource guide, and they should be reading that very closely. All right, so some best practices and other practical ideas during this process is I recommend, especially if you're in person, have a binder, have a flash drive or a Google Drive with docs, because that is honestly much safer. And just stuff that is going to contain all chapter information. Another thing is think about what you wish that you'd known starting your officer tenure. I think it's good to keep some of that feedback in hand, especially when incoming officers, are being trained. And, if there's anything that, you've learned in the past, it's always good to impart that wisdom. So definitely keep those notes throughout the year and just during your tenure. Another thing is to introduce new officers to important bank and school contacts. Make sure that signatories are changed on accounts and make sure that that information is shared. I've seen it happen a lot where that is one thing that happens to fall through the cracks. And then I have officers email me wondering how in the world they're going to be able to access any bank or school accounts. And sometimes that's a bit of a process to try to hunt down any information because really that falls on the officers to manage that. The executive office does not really get involved in chapter bank account and finances that deeply. We will help and assist in the setting up of that and creation of your accounts, especially if you're working with a local bank. But from there on out, the administration of your finances and record keeping, that is on you. Okay, and last, share contact info. We know if you're graduating, you're focusing on final exams and even possibly LSAT test prep, but please be available to work with each other as this transition process is going on. All right, so I just want to quickly cover chapter events and programs. And so I have some general event advice that I would like to impart. We have some programming requirements and examples that are listed out in our chapter operations guide. Please use them. We can also provide past calendars from your chapter. That's another reason why we collect those. We don't just ask for them just to mark them as, a completed thing. We really look at them and we like to save them, especially when we see really good examples of chapter programming. And, we'd love to share that with other students so they can see that and how they might want to implement something similar with their local chapter. As a reminder, your calendars should be about 75% professional and academic, 10% social events, 15% community service events, plus fundraising events as needed. Chapter programming is not only your best recruitment tool, but also what keeps your chapter membership engaged with, just engaged. Some other advice that I have with events is I definitely recommend working with other organizations on your campus, as I said before, to co-sponsor and share resources. You can even double up on your event categories and, maybe do hybrid, something that is like both a community service and social and, a little bit of professional event too. And another thing is have a niche or signature event that you're known for. I know some chapters do annual retreats, and those are always a really great draw for people wanting to join. And if anyone also has a major event that their chapter does, please feel free to share in the chat. And also feel free to think about submitting an award application for a programming category. All right, so continuing in a virtual or hybrid environment. I've talked a little at length already about the pros and cons of conducting virtual versus in-person events, but I have a few other bullet points that I just want you to keep in mind as we continue in a semi-virtual environment, since that's still happening now. Just one, be flexible and always try to plan ahead. Two, have virtual backup plans. Consider a mix of in-person and virtual events as just a new norm going forward. And three, if you are interested, in wanting to do like an easy professional event, for example, why not host an alumni panel? Our office can certainly help assist with setting that up. Our alumni love talking to students, especially pre-law students, because your minds are so fresh and you're still in the beginning. And, at the start of your lives and careers. So please, we can help with that. And they work out really great as virtual events. All right, so some national PA.D events and programs to keep in mind. We have a PA.D speaker series that, we pretty much do that all year round. These are online sort of webinar events, and you can host events around our speaker series. Maybe you can have sort of a watch party or something, or you can even share these recordings in your chapter communications or social media as a helpful recruitment tool for new members to get them interested. We have PA.D speaker series events where we have, members. We just did one recently where some of our alumni members were talking about their experiences in working in government, and their very different journeys in that. So it's really great content. And again, also a good recruitment plug. And we also have partner content. You all should have gotten an email yesterday, actually, about some of those that will come and do events for you, like Access Lex or PowerScore, for example. And, they definitely just reach out and they would love to work with you, with your chapter, to do any local events on, any topics such as financing law school or preparing for the LSAT, and any logic games or stuff like that. So something to think about. And yeah, we're still going to continue with ongoing webinars as we are still in a semi-virtual environment. And just think about participation in other chapters events as well. This is a time for networking, and even on our website's calendar, we always publish what other chapters or even other organizations are doing, and you can directly pull that content to and invite your chapter members. So a little bit about PreLaw Conference. This is my last section today, pretty much that I'm going to go over. And again, I feel like I've said a mouthful, but all right, since you've already heard me mention this quite a bit, okay, so PreLaw Conference is an annual event that occurs each fall around November, and it's one of the largest PreLaw events in the country, bringing together other PreLaw members, law school admissions counselors, alumni, and professionals in the legal field for networking, workshops, keynote speakers, and also, like I mentioned, our super highly anticipated mock trial competition, which I know some of you are going to be really excited to be able to do that in person again, and our law school expo and more. Once again, this is another mouthful, but your main takeaway here is that this event is a lot of fun. I will say this is also my favorite event to work as an executive office staff person. So yeah. So as you've already heard me say, we are planning to have PreLaw Conference in person this year. We, of course, are still going to monitor what's going on with COVID as we get closer to the event. But just so you're aware, typically before COVID times, we would hold the conference in Washington, D.C. each year. So you have the opportunity to attend our conference programming while also taking in our nation's capital. I live in the DMV region, so shout out Baltimore City. But I always love visiting DC. I always love exploring DC. So it's a lot of fun for pre-laws. So with that said, this is, again, a really great opportunity for pre-law students around the country to get together, to meet one another, and to network. It's incredibly valuable on a personal level with all the networking that happens here. I cannot emphasize that enough. And the conference is also a really great first teaser event if you ever plan on attending our other big organizational event, which is convention. So just something to think about down the road as a P.A.D member. Convention, it's a biannual event and is attended primarily by our law and alumni members. This year, convention is going to be taking place August 3rd through the 7th in Scottsdale, Arizona. This event, pre-laws can also attend, but I recommend more focusing on going to PreLaw Conference and then convention down the line. But convention is also a lot of fun, and it happens every 2 years, and it's always usually in a different city. So yeah, we're excited as we're already planning on that too. But yeah, so for PreLaw Conference, we suggest for the funding part, we suggest applying for school funding or start having these conversations on fundraising as soon as you can, see what that looks like. If you ever need a funding proposal template and a budget template to request funds from your school, I have one available, and I'm happy to provide this for you, especially closer to the event when we'll have a little bit more details nailed down, like registration costs, for example, and any hotel costs as well to consider. Okay, so we expect to see every pre-law chapter well represented at PreLaw Conference. Even if you can only afford to send one member, just think of the incredible wealth of legal and law school information they're going to be bringing back to your chapter. This year's conference, as I said, it's currently being planned. We're hoping for it to be in person, and we're going to make sure to send you lots of details about this year's conference the closer we get to fall and the event. So, woo! Again, that was a lot. Thank you for sticking with me this far. I want to wrap up my presentation by doing a quick walkthrough of our www.pad.org resources, as you'll see on my last slide here. So everything that you'll pretty much need to know as pre-law officers can be found on www.pad.org on the pre-law officer resources page. And these 4 guides on my screen are the most important ones that you will need. So the pre-law operations guide is our biggest guide. It's the meatiest one, but it has and it breaks down beautifully everything that you need to know to lead your chapter, like everything on logistics from chapter programming and holding events, recruitment advice. And, even if we start getting into tax stuff, if you have an event and let's say that you need to provide a W-9 form and, anything like that, it gives you steps on that, which ultimately, if you need anything like that, just request me directly and I will assist you there. Our new officers resource guide I've mentioned before, that is something that I pass on to new officers, but also all officers really should be keeping and saving a copy of this guide in your chapter records. And when officer transitions are happening and the incoming officers are being trained, that is something that, should be gone over with them thoroughly. So please make sure you also have this guide saved too and are reading it front to back. Our fundraising guide, that name is pretty much self-explanatory. It kind of breaks down just a lot of tips and ideas of different fundraising events that you can have, and just even some logistical planning around that as well. If you ever have any questions too, please reach out to me directly, and I'm also happy to provide some feedback on any fundraising opportunities that you're looking into for your chapter. And last, our pre-law model bylaws. I haven't said much about this, but this is also something that should be taken a look at during the officer transition process each spring. Your pre-law model bylaws, that is a template that we will provide. That's basically your chapter's constitution or bylaws. I really recommend that officers take a look at this annually in case there are updates that need to be made, but every chapter should have a chapter constitution, whether your school requires it. And even if your school doesn't require it, you should still have this, because that will help break down any, a lot of what I've covered already that, can provide steps on what officer roles are, how elections should be done with the chapter. So it's just sort of that sort of chapter housekeeping items, even breaking down and defining what a chapter member in good standing looks like. If there are local chapter dues, that should also be in your bylaws. So just a lot of that. And also please make sure, for officers in particular, please make sure that your chapter's bylaws are accessible to your entire chapter as well. Every pre-law member should be able to access their chapter's bylaws. All right. So thank you all so much for attending. I think we've got about 10 minutes or so left, but I can also hang on a little bit longer. I'm going to jump into questions. If anyone has to leave for class or anything like that, or doesn't want to stick around, you can definitely set up a one-on-one to meet with me later, when you can just send an email to me at prelaw@pad.org. Okay, so I see some comments in the chat. I'm glad to see that people are using Canvas. I'm making a note of that again. I am a millennial, but I have heard students using that. Okay, so I see here, I would love to hear ideas for some events. We've been really struggling with attendance and engagement in my chapter, and I want to plan something fun for our members to get them excited about being a part of PAD again. Savannah, yeah, I completely understand, especially lately, I think people have been a little bit burned out, and, especially if you're if your campus is virtual in any way, engagement can be a little bit hard. But I think some of the stuff that I covered, like, again, if you maybe have like, if you're virtual, you could even still do sort of like a watch party night or something like that. Somebody just commented saying that they do hikes. I love that. And especially once the weather gets a little bit nicer here, at least in Baltimore, I miss taking hikes. But I think those are really great. And I also love that, Haley, you pointed out, mental health paint days. I think all of that is really, really good for mental health, and I think is really timely too. So, that's another thing to consider too. Maybe sit down with your members. You could poll your membership, your chapter membership, for some ideas and see what they would like to do as well. It doesn't just have to be the brainstorming of just the officers, but just, putting together timely events. Maybe even take a look too of like what's going on in the world or any national holidays. For example, it's Black History Month. So maybe your chapter, if they're interested in any DEI initiatives, or if you have a Black student union on campus, think about ways how you can have events that maybe even engage the intersection of social justice, or, civil rights stuff and the law. And that, like, that's a programming idea right there. And maybe that can even honestly help boost attendance and engagement, because I think some people too might even wonder, with a legal fraternity, all right, what exactly do we do here? So yeah. Okay, we do some socials before our chapter meeting, so new members and returning members can meet each other. Next week, we're having a Taco Tuesday before our chapter meeting. Love a good Taco Tuesday. Haley, you're killing it. Your chapter is killing it, I gotta say. All right. All right, I'm really glad to see people are really engaging here and getting a lot out of this, and are sharing these ideas. This is another reason too why we wanted to really put together this this session as well, not just so that you can hear me just speak, and potentially, help giving you ideas or assist you with your operations here too, but also, brainstorm with each other, help each other out. It's always great to see. Sure. Julia has a question. Are there any rules or restrictions around having a formal? We don't have any restrictions about that. You're certainly welcome to have a formal. I would just check in to see with your school if they have any restrictions or things to consider. But, I would just make sure that, you talk to your chapter. You can send out a form or anything if you're going to be serving food, for example, see if there's any dietary restrictions or anything like that. But us as a fraternity, please, by all means, a lot of our chapters actually like to do formals at the end of the semester. Okay. Haley, I see professional-wise been hosting diversity workshops, LSAT workshops, professional panels. How you about getting some lawyer volunteers to help us with a mock interview workshop? That is awesome. Again, Haley, since you brought up professional events and I see that you're talking about getting some lawyer volunteers, if anyone ever needs to be connected to any of our alumni members that are working actively in the legal profession, or even some of our law school student members too, I'm happy to directly connect you with them. Okay, and I'm also going to put my email in the chat for anyone that needs it. Okay, to incentivize further engagement, are gift cards okay to give out if we go by the system? Yes, by the point system, yes, Melly, you are okay to give out any gift cards if you're gonna go with the point system. Sometimes people like to do raffles as well. I actually had a chapter let me know. And another example of how you could utilize a point system, I actually had a chapter email me this morning, and they let me know that the way that they do their point system is as members get a point as they go to any chapter meetings or events, and members that have reached 12 points by by like the end of spring semester, for example, are eligible to have their graduation cords paid for by the chapter itself. Okay, yeah, I think it was Texas State. All right. Does anybody have any other questions? I am happy to answer in the 5 minutes or so we have left. Or if, again, if anybody wants to just meet with me individually, just email me and we can meet via Zoom like this. And I also apologize for my weird tech issues, but again, virtual environments, and this is why it's always good to be flexible. Okay, yeah, Savannah, right on the money with that. Definitely good to do gift card raffles. Okay, I love that. And I love to see too how you're utilizing social media with that as well. Savannah, I might have to have you, if you wanted to jot down any ideas or anything like that, I'd be happy to publicize that as well to our chapter members. But yeah, also, again, if by any means too, if anybody has anything else that they want to email me, I think it would probably also be a really good idea if we updated some of our guides or even just compiled some of this information of just examples of what chapters can do. I think that would be great. Okay, awesome. And please, because a lot of this that I'm seeing in the chat already sounds so good, please make sure you apply for awards. I think while I have some time left, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to navigate. I'm just want to show you on our website as well, where you can find some of this stuff. So for PreLaw, so for the PreLaw Officer Resources, I'm on the homepage of www.pad.org. And when I go to members, I go to PreLaw, just in case anyone needs help navigating. Under Officer Resources, that has all of our documents laid out, our operating guides, like I mentioned, the new Officer Resource Guide, the Chapter Operations Guide, model bylaws, even our chapter ritual handbook for those that are new to doing initiation ceremonies. And you know, that guide lays out everything you need to know on how to set that up, the script that you will need to recite during. And we have two versions of it, one for in-person event and another one that is virtual ceremony guidelines if you were doing it over Zoom, for example. So yeah, everything that you need to know, all these drop downs, this is all helpful officer stuff. And we even have our important dates and deadlines at the bottom of the page. This information, some of this needs to be updated, but most of it is pretty accurate, just with the exception probably of this mock trial information, National Hazing Prevention Week, and PreLaw Conference that has to be updated. But everything else on here is current information. And I just want to show you where awards are located. So I'm going to go back to PreLaw and drop down here. That's where awards are. And you are more than welcome to apply today. Submit your award applications today, because again, you have from now until the first Monday in June, June 6th. And that could be here before you know it, but yeah, so you can download the forms there and send them to my email. Stop sharing my screen. So, okay. All right. Well, if that's it, looks like I only have 2 people left. I am probably going to end this now, but thank you so much for attending. This has been a wonderful session, and I really enjoyed answering y'all's questions. And yeah, if you need me, again, just email me. And thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day.